Good day, everyone. My name is Brian Luthwaite, and I'm here in Whitianga in the Coromandel of New Zealand. We're in New Zealand for a couple of months trying to escape extreme cold temperatures in northern Canada. Tammy asked if I would take the time to put together some thoughts and a short message to send over to you in the announcement or in the release of this website called the Pedagogy of Difference. And just to provide a bit of encouragement around this, but also I think to give some insight to how this project was initially developed. Way back in around 2010, I came to Queensland on a sabbatical through my home university at the University of Manitoba in Canada. My wife, Clara, I shouldn't say my wife at that time because she still is my wife after nearly 50 years. But my wife was working in the Townsville area as a community dentist. She was working in Palm Island and also in Ingham and also there in Townsville. And I came over and I remember a couple of really important conversations. One that I had during that time that had to do with educational practice, in particular the practice of teachers. There was a lot of attention at that time in Australia to the work of John Hattie, and that probably is going on because John's made a significant contribution to an understanding of the practices that can impact on teachers. But I remember a conversation with the executive director of the Diocese of Catholic Education at that time, Dr. Kathy Day. And I remember vividly a conversation we had where I asked her I didn't know a lot about Catholic education, and I asked her what the mandate of Catholic education was. And she talked about providing quality and equitable educational opportunities for students, especially the students that might be seen to be underserved. And we talked a little bit about primarily the education of Indigenous students, which I was very much involved with in Northern Canada. So today you're seeing the launch of a website that's called the Pedagogy of Difference, but there's also a parallel website in Canada that I was chief investigator on called Pedagogy of Consequence. And it's primarily located within First Nation communities in our far north that try to address the disregarded past and the disregarded interests and needs of Indigenous students. And Kathy mentioned that it seemed to her that although there was a lot of activity in Australia around education that would improve outcomes for Indigenous students, there was seemingly little evidence of what might provide for equitable outcomes. So I remember after that conversation, I started looking into the educational research in Australia and to read of accounts that primarily came from people like Rhonda Craven and Bob Lingard, hoping it's been a few years now and hopefully I get the names right. But clearly within the country, there was an absence of scholarly research that tried to understand what was the appropriate pedagogical stance and activity of teachers that could make a difference for students. Bob Lingard in particular said that if there's one thing that's noteworthy in Australia about educational research and outcomes for Indigenous students is it seems that the Commonwealth is indifferent towards what might be seen as effective teaching practices. And that really heralded in, I think, a real honest identification of a need that needed to be served by Catholic Education Townsville, and that was trying to understand the practices that would benefit Indigenous students by making sure that we engaged with Indigenous students and their parents to try to understand what would be a meaningful pedagogical stance. Lingard talked about this one thing that was characteristic, and that was that the Commonwealth seemed to be indifferent. So based on that, I made in collaboration with others a research application to the Australian Research Council that was called Seeking a Pedagogy of Difference, not no longer moving out of the indifference to try to identify the practices that would be of most consequence to students. This project was, I found it in the 5 years I was in Townsville and working in a variety of capacities as a researcher. This was certainly some of the most rewarding and interesting research that occurred. And I'm really glad to see the long-standing effect of it in terms of hopefully not just the diocese, but through Australia in general. I made a point of looking at the Australia Journal of Teacher Education, which houses research that's been done in Australia over many decades. And I noticed that in their top paper, most cited paper categories, one of the scholarly articles that came out of this project has been downloaded in excess of 50,000 times. Another one about 25,000 times, and another about 10,000 times. So I think it's clear that the research has really been put in the hands, first of all, of practitioners, so teacher educators and students and teachers themselves, to try to work towards a more effective practice to benefit Indigenous students. And I haven't been able to take a look at the new website in detail, but I've been able to see that it's continued to carry the flavor of that additional research. The original research, which tries to help teachers to identify what they can be doing more of and less of to try to be more effective in working for Indigenous students, making sure that if this is put into effect, it will make a difference not only for First Nation students, but for students across the board. It was a delight to work with the team at Catholic Education. That's what research is about. It's not so, I think what we did at the James Cook University team, our job was to try to foster the development and build the capacity of Catholic education in their work. And now, hard to believe, 10 years on, this is still going strong. I have fond memories of working with the team there. I don't want to mention too many names because I'm bound to leave some out, but there were lots of laughs with Tammy and Gail along the way. We had international presentations, I believe, in New York and Chicago. I still have fond memories of a spring day in Chicago where it was very, very warm. We felt, us Northern Canadians, and Gail being rugged up in blankets as she traveled around on an outdoor bus because it was, for her, it was so cold. But it was certainly a very rich time. I think at the heart of what I took away most significantly was just hearing from the students and from family members about the long legacy of the negative impact of education on Indigenous families in Australia, a message that's so similar here in Canada. But I think what really caught me was parents and students had such a clear idea of how education had to change, and they were able to make that apparent. And that now has been really represented in the website, the stories documented, and the practices identified that every teacher can give attention to. And I think I want to make this my closing message, is that Rhonda Craven made it clear that the Commonwealth needed to really pursue understanding from the voice of Indigenous students and their families, the meaningful changes that needed to occur to try to advance improvement in educational quality. And alarmingly, it has taken such a long time for that evidence to be there. I would love to have seen this project extend into a further phase, because it's certainly necessary, I think, to move ahead with this research in terms of real quantitative details around what some of those most significant factors might be. But I always found in teacher education, especially working at James Cook University with undergraduate students, that they seek to make the changes that are meaningful for students, but often there's nothing there that they can draw from to be able to make those changes. And that's the significance of this website and the research. It makes it really clear the changes that all teachers can make to try to improve the experience that they demonstrate. And at the essence of that are the building of positive relationships that take away any prejudice or belief that students are not able to succeed, because teachers ultimately are the ones that will make the difference in creating those change. I wish I was with you today. I would be love to drop in and see you and go on another helicopter ride in Mount Isa, Tammy, and I just know that you're going to have a very special time today. All the best to you, everyone. Kia ora.